Do you ever come across something that you know it be true, but you just cannot fathom how so? Well, we are not here to talk about my ex-wife's side gag, but about how Kena Bridge of Spirits is more polished than most AAA games, despite it being from a small indie developer, Ember Labs, which, as it happens, wasn't even a video game studio before this game, which I guess is a weird way of saying this is their very first game. Whatever, give these guys the monies. If you like the video, give me the thumbs, and why not stick around by clicking that subscribe button. My first thoughts when playing this game? This is just too cute and relaxing. But I was wrong. Kena Bridge of Spirits is a third-person action-adventure game created by Ember Studios, who before making this game were solely an animation production team, who have made a few short films, with their most recognisable work likely being the Majora's Mask short film Terrible Fate, that took the internet by storm a few years ago, and their previous work in animation is what is immediately evident when playing Kena. The game has a very cinematic presentation in both its cinematics and gameplay, which for me was the driving force for this game that helped keep me engrossed throughout. But first, some backstory. We take control of Kena, a spirit guide by day, and well, I can only really use my imagination as to what by night, as for a game that has a titular protagonist, Kena is surprisingly two-dimensional in comparison to the other characters I met along my adventure. In this world, pain and regret can prevent a spirit from leaving the realm of the living, causing anguish for those left behind, and a spirit guide's job is to help those lost souls find peace and move on to the other side. The narrative is essentially made up of a few short stories that you explore through Kena, with Kena's own path being somewhat unexplored. We do get a few small snippets of backstory regarding her past and family, but it never really goes anywhere or dives into any of its suggestions. Kena mentions a couple of times she became a spirit guide following her father's footsteps, and that she is keen to honour his memory, but we don't really learn anything about that, nor does she really have her own character arc or development, and that is probably the one thing that this game really lacks. A relatable protagonist who overcomes their own trials and tribulations, their own story to follow, but she feels like a side character in her own game. Luckily though, these tormented souls, check out my review on that one, cheap advertising ploy there, sorry about that. Anyway, the misguided spirits have pretty interesting backstories you piece together in the lead up to conquering them in battle. Some even pull on the heartstrings a little, as the game successfully made me empathise with them, and an empathetic villain is always of interest to me if written well. I really enjoyed the tales, and it made the combat encounters with the spirits all the more meaningful and exciting. I felt that for these poor souls, this was their torment. But for Kena, it was just another Tuesday. But even though the game lacks an overall narrative around the central character, and for these shortcomings it makes up for visually, audially, and with all the other senses as it all feels in itself, like an animation similar to that of a Pixar movie. There is so much passion and craftsmanship in the game's presentation, it's unreal. The graphics, although a very specific animation style, they have a photorealistic look about them. The lighting, the landscapes, the magical effects of the combat, it all looks incredible and it runs just as well. I played the game on the PS5 and it ran at a solid 60 frames per second. The only stutters I really found were rare in the transitions from gameplay to cutscenes, but for the most part, it flowed like a good wine, baby. The music and voice acting all contributes and made for some excellent scenes that would be worthy of the big screen. One fact I found particularly interesting is the voice actor for Kena is one of the developer's daughters. I mean, that's how indie this thing is.
Death and corruption are all that remain here.
This land can be healed, but you cannot stay here, Spirit. You must move on.
You are the one who does not belong. I will never abandon my people.
But of course this thing isn't a film but a video game, so I guess all this doesn't really mean diddly squat if the gameplay is a total mess. But guess what? It ain't. Let's clear one thing up. Bridge of Spirits isn't going to win any awards for originality. Ember Labs may not have developed a game before, but boy is gaming clearly their favourite hobby in between making short films, because just about everything in this game is a gameplay trope that has been used time and time again without being freshened up in any way, just like that crusty old sock under your bed. The exception here is it is all done very, very well, and it's all been polished to a bright shine. It's a case of if it ain't broken, don't fix it. The game itself is also pretty short at around 8 hours long to finish, so it's over way before it outstays its welcome. In your quest to boot these spirits over to the other side, you'll be platforming, puzzle solving and fighting a variety of foes, things we have seen before, but the unique aspect here is you will be collecting and will be accompanied by the Rot, these cute little creatures who are good for two things: helping Kina in her travels with the aforementioned puzzle solving and fighting, and giving Sony another iconic character they can add to their roster of stuffed doll merchandise. The game world consists of a hub that splits off into other areas you unlock as you progress through the game. These are unlocked through masks you collect from the spirits you help leave the world, and it first gives off a Metroidvania style of exploration, which I guess it kind of is, just a very, very light style of it. And despite first impressions, it is a linear experience with a few optional areas to complete along the way, or you can backtrack to one once you have acquired a certain item. These luscious vistas are plagued by a mysterious fungal plague that sweeps the land, and the origins of the Rot are explained as you progress. Again, this is a foreign land, and Kina just appears to be in it. I wasn't even sure if this was actually her own home that has been stricken by the Rot, or if she is just away on business. But to help you through this, the Rot are incorporated into the gameplay, both with exploration and combat. The exploration of the world is full of puzzles that you can use the Rot and their few forms to solve and navigate. You can use them to move large objects, destroy rot-infused pathways and doors, and throughout the game your team of Rot will grow as you find more both through progression and hidden collectibles. The puzzles you solve with the Rot though, while simple in their execution, are sometimes quite complex in their solutions. Whilst they are not going to blow your mind, they are enjoyable, and there were a few that caught me off guard for a moment. The puzzle platforming is nothing new, but again, it's fun, and if you're into that kind of thing, you will enjoy it. The world is an absolute beaut to explore, and the Rot that are with you definitely add a layer of humour to what would otherwise be a lot of isolated exploration. The way they interact with each other and the world around you never failed to put a smile on my face. As you progress through the world, you will be collecting various collectibles and two types of currency, one to purchase skills on your pretty small skill tree to upgrade your combat abilities, and another currency to pimp your Rot. I found that this currency though, that I was always finding to be kind of pointless, as the only thing you can really do with it is buy your little Rot cute little hats, and they don't really do anything other than change the look of your little followers, which has high cute factor but not much else. But I guess there are an abundance of hats to collect and buy if that's your kind of thing. For me though, that one thing that tops everything and is definitely the selling point for this game and makes it a must play is the combat. Again, I keep repeating myself, just like a lot of the tropes in this game do, but it's nothing new and it's fairly simple. There are no complex systems in place here, and even by incorporating the Rot, it isn't anything revolutionary, but again it's executed with precision and polish, and the presentation of these fights make for some intense combat encounters. You've got your primary weapon, which is your staff that you have your standard light and heavy attacks with, that you can kind of put together for some pretty basic combos. In addition to this, you will obtain additional skills and abilities as you get further into the game. A bow, an explosive blob, and you can parry enemies followed by, if successfully done, a devastating blow. Enemies require you to use the collected abilities in different ways through the fights. The blob, for example, yeah, it's not called the blob, I definitely forgot what it was called, but you can use this to blast away a swarm of enemies, or pull down the flying cretins to the ground, or to expose the weak point for a hardened shell tank-like enemy. And this is what I really liked about the combat in Kina. The weapons and skills have no more originality to them than a Joker picture with an inspirational quote on, but they are satisfying to use when combat is a challenge and at times incorporates puzzle solving into the combat. It is incredibly satisfying. At first I found the melee combat to be a little too simplistic, but it is the variety of enemies and their gameplay systems with their offense and defense that eventually gave me the need to vary up my approach to taking these guys out, and it is the inclusion of new enemy types and skills you learn that keeps the combat systems fresh and challenging. And Kena is surprisingly challenging. Oh man, those boss battles. There are a fair number of boss battles in the game, and whilst there are some simple hit-dodge fights, the ones that stand out like someone who coughs more than once in a public place at the moment. The way they require your knowledge of the newly acquired skills in a hectic arena leads into some tense gaming moments, and mixed with Ember Lab's ability to make the whole thing incredibly cinematic, there are some memorable fights here that, to be honest, I wanted to go back and do again had I had the chance. Whilst a lot of the enemies, including the bosses, aren't really that aesthetically pleasing, they all have this same root tree-like aesthetic to them, it's the way in which they fight and the variety in their gameplay systems that make them so interesting and likeable. I have heard some people comparing the combat to Dark Souls, which I personally don't get. I mean, it seems like every game with a parrying system and above average difficulty as compared to friggin' Dark Souls. But that is like saying eating eggs and flour is the same as eating a cake. It's not. And that is Kena in a nutshell. Whilst it has the ingredients of many other games, Zelda, Overlord, Uncharted, Dark Souls if you must, its own charming identity is enough to deliver a refreshing, jolly good time. One that I was constantly surprised with throughout my playthrough. I find in the early stages of a console's life cycle, there are always those games that blow you away graphically. And mechanically, I remember playing a little game called Heavenly Sword for the first time on PS3 back in 2007. My memories of that game are how impossibly smooth, clear, detailed the graphical fidelity of that game was, and how you could use the controller to drive the arrows. And I mean, Andy Serkis looked like Andy Serkis. I bet though if I was to play that game now, I'd probably have those memories completely replaced by how poor it all performs now. And in another 14 years, I feel Kena may be my 2021's Heavenly Sword. If that makes any sense whatsoever. But I generally hope this game is a success. With more strings to their financial bow, Ember Labs could be one to watch for us players, and for other game developers. One thing I want to mention, I had no bugs or glitches in this game whatsoever. That in itself seems to be an achievement these days when it really shouldn't be. But hey, that's gaming corporate greed for you, and when someone does release a game in its what should be normal state, it's amazing. Sony clearly saw the potential in these guys and dug into their pockets for console exclusivity. Let's hope they dig a little deeper for whatever Ember Labs has in store next. It could be banging. But this is all just my opinion. What did you think? Agree with me? Or am I just full of shit? Let me know in the comments below. Hit that like button if you like the video, and if you like supporting indie game developers, why not support indie YouTubers by hitting that subscribe button? Yeah, that was cringe. Sorry.